It's a minute after 6, so let's start the evening. Good evening to all that are here, our candidates. I thank you for attending Envision Greater Fond du Lac's 52nd Assembly District Candidate Forum. My name is Gary Sharp. I'm a retired circuit court judge here in Fond du Lac, and I've been asked to serve as the moderator for this evening's event. Before we begin, I'd like to welcome the candidates. I have the Democratic candidate, Joe Lavrenz, to my right, and the Republican candidate, Jerry O'Connor, to my left. Gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for being here. These two candidates are vying for the 52nd Assembly District seat and will be on the election ballot on November 8th. You can find more information on both of these candidates, as well as polling locations, absentee voting information, voter registration information on the City of Fond du Lac's website. Before we begin, I'd like to mention a few things regarding tonight's event. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the questions asked of them. Rebuttals will be addressed if they arise. The candidates and those in attendance are asked to exhibit professionalism, to show respect for each other, and the moderator, that's me. Although I think I still remember how to hold people in contempt, but I don't expect we'll have to get there this evening. And of course, be respectful to any guests. I'd ask that everyone be mindful of the time allotted to each of the candidates for their responses, and to refrain from using any sort of technology, cell phones, etc. So, to begin, I would like to ask each candidate to introduce themselves, tell us why you're seeking the vacant seat for the 52nd Assembly District, and why at this time. This response is limited to 2 minutes per candidate. I'll let each of you know as you approach that 2-minute time limit if required. So, in alphabetical order for this first introduction, we'll look to Joe Lavrenz. Joe, if you could introduce yourself and tell us why you're running for the position.
So, yeah, my name is Joe Lavrenz, and I want to run for the 52nd district here. I'm planning on running because I think of myself as more of a problem solver. That's what I've done in every job that I've really had. I worked for Spectrum, working to fix internet outages and work to fix computer issues. And that's what I do with my current job at Pitney Bowes also, is I help people with their computer systems and their postage machines. And I think that we have lots of different problems that are solvable in the state assembly. And I'd like to be able to work together with multiple people from there in order to find the best solutions for Fond du Lac and for the state of Wisconsin. I, work together with a lot of people. I, as chair of the Fond du Lac Democratic Party also, I get to deal with basically all of our membership and help with trying to figure out the best course of action for what we do as a party. And I'd like to continue that throughout the state.
All right, thank you. And then Jerry O'Connor, if you could please introduce yourself and tell us why you've decided to run at this point.
Thank you. First, let me thank Envision of Greater Fond du Lac for sponsoring the forum, and for the retired judge to graciously give his time to serve as our moderator. The decision for the people that are sitting here tonight or will be watching this later on YouTube boils down to which candidate is better equipped to serve the needs and the purposes of the 52nd District in the State Assembly. As an introduction, my wife Luann and I live off Esterbrook Road west of the airport. We both lost spouses. We married 6.5 years ago. Now we claim we have 5 kids and 4 grandkids between us. I spent my life and careers in business and in finance. And to that extent, I retired as the CEO of the NBW Bank of Waupun. I don't have to get involved in politics. I can move on with life. But when I look at the generations to come, both for my family and those of my friends and neighbors, I am compelled to get involved to make a difference in the lives of people in our district. We need to preserve an American dream for the generations that are going to follow us. As a community banker, I was able to be involved in many aspects of the lives of customers. They could open a savings account. We financed that first car, the first home, help someone buy a business or expand a business or join the family farm. We were involved in all aspects of their lives. We were there for the rough patches. The rough patches, we helped people, and they were able to find that they could save their home or save their business or save the family farm.
20 seconds.
We were there also to help with the people that wanted to achieve their dreams and realize their own plans for the future. I want to bring that kind of evidence or that kind of experience to the Capitol. I believe it'll make a difference by having spent a career helping people in critical areas. It's to work on those same kinds of issues at a state level, and I'll do that with jobs, education, economic and social initiatives, and that will benefit all citizens.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the first question. There are currently 2,500 jobs available in Fond du Lac County. The county's labor force participation rate is historically low at just 67%. What policies would you support or enact to encourage labor force participation? So I'll ask if either of you want to jump on this first. If not, I'll call one of you. Any preference?
I'll take it.
You will? Okay. Mr. O'Connor, go ahead.
All right. For the past 25 years, I've been directly involved in workforce development here in Fond du Lac County. I've served on the Waupun Economic Development Court Board, served on the Fond du Lac County Economic Development Corporation Board, helped put together a merger which resulted in Envision, and then I continued working with the Envision, or the county's Capital Markets Board. So I've been involved on a daily basis, but just as importantly, I was chairman of the Wisconsin Bankers Association, and at that level, that was a discussion that we were always looking at as to how we could help businesses employ more people, make new opportunities happen, et cetera. Right now, we have the exact opposite position. It's not about creating new jobs, it's finding people to fill the jobs we have. I think the first part is you peel backwards. How did we get in this situation? Why do we have so many job openings in the country? First thing you look at, there's 75 million baby boomers that are leaving the marketplace, and they're being replaced by 65 million Gen Xers. It's a 10 million person shortfall. That was the first thing that we could have known 50 years ago, and we haven't planned for it, neither in our schools nor in our government practices or enterprise that's looking at jobs. Second, educationally, we're not graduating kids with the ability to be employed at 18 years old. We need to get skills, trainings, trades, and services back into our high schools to give the 70% of kids that don't go on to four-year colleges an opportunity to excel and do it earlier in life. Government subsidies.
20 seconds.
Government subsidies that we've seen through the COVID period and excess unemployment, that equipped people to say, hey, I'm going to retire early, or I'm not going to get into the marketplace. I'll wait until the money goes away. We need to do something about it, and it won't be simple. It's going to take time to turn this around, but we need to focus on how we can get private-public partnerships together, creating further job opportunities and bringing new people into our workplace.
Thank you. Mr. Lavrenz.
So I have a slightly different approach on that. I feel like what we really need to do is actually, I agree, getting more education for the kids, for basically being able to work in the trades. But really, if you want to get more people for jobs, you should pay them more or give them better benefits. If you can work towards that, it'll give them an incentive to actually, move off of, living off of the COVID money, as you had said before. But give them a reason to go out to these jobs and start working on them. Make the jobs better. You don't want to have, people don't want to get into a career because they've seen that there's a difference. They don't have to be in a career that they hate. They can work towards something that they actually want to do. Combination. Yeah.
All right. Is that?
Sure.
All right. Thank you. I don't know as though we have a issue that was rise to a need to have a rebuttal at this point. But certainly, at the end, each of you will be allowed an opportunity to speak, and if you want to raise some issue, but, all right. Thank you both for your response. The next question is about the housing market. According to the 2021 American Community Survey one-year estimates, more than 14% of the homeowners and 41% of the renters in Fond du Lac County are spending more than 30% of their monthly household income on housing. How does the state plan to continue addressing workforce housing issues? Mr. Lavrenz, if you'd like to go first on this one?
Yep. So I've lived in an apartment basically my entire life, so I know about renting and that consistently going up. It's hard to maintain, your good living situation when the rent continues to rise, no matter what you do. Obviously, getting better paying, work could help with that, but also just putting in some sort of controls to help, control the rent, so that way it doesn't continue to rise as high as it has been. It's kind of crazy to me, in my opinion, that it can go up more than in 1 year, and then another year it'll go up by more than it did the last time. It just continues to rise that way, and I unfortunately am not as familiar on the housing side of it because I don't own a house. But I know that that's obviously an issue too there with property tax and property cost.
Right. Thank you, Mr. O'Connor.
If we look at housing and we see increasing costs, there are reasons we have increasing costs. The first thing I would identify, we're sitting on 8 to 10% inflation right now. But if you get into the actual construction of new homes, those dollars can be 30, 40, 50% higher than they were pre-COVID. That increases the cost of new housing. New housing is where someone is either first time or they're moving up. The first time home buyer is caught in the same trap. As prices go up on new homes, that makes the value of the existing home market more valuable. So as that increases, now you get back to the first-time home buyer, it's really difficult for the new home buyer to absorb these increases. And as a result, that factors down to the next level, and that is people living in apartments typically are the people that move up the ladder as first-time home buyers. But now that first-time home has become very expensive, and they can't afford to move from the apartment to their first home. So then you're left with the apartment market. Now you have more people staying in that marketplace. That's where their housing is at, and the demand is higher than the supply. Traditional values, traditional equations, the cost of housing is going to go up. We're going to have to bring the cost of inflation down. We're going to have to get oil back to a manageable level. You're paying twice a barrel for oil as you were in January of 2020. That
20 seconds.
Every facet of housing, every product, every service and delivery that is attached to housing is all up in significant numbers. That impacts housing. So to really affect housing, we've got to bring down costs. It's starting with oil, and that will filter itself back down through the economy.
Thank you. Let's talk about the state budget. There is a projected budget surplus of $5 billion at the end of this biennium, and an additional $1.7 billion in the state's rainy day fund. What are your priorities, if any, for the use of that money? And we'll start with Mr. O'Connor.
Well, when it comes to taxes, the first thing I would say is amongst states, it's called a competitive sport. We're all competing for people to live in our communities or stay in our communities, retire in our communities, and in this case, the state of Wisconsin. But people, when they reach a certain age, are saying, what is the cost of a total taxes to me? And as a result of that, we have people leaving in Wisconsin. We probably don't have to see if they're going to North Dakota or Michigan. They're going south somewhere. We need to look at those tax structures in those states and have a competitive plan to compete with that. If we go back to the last budget, Tony Evers, for the 21 through 23 budget, it offered an increase of 9.7%, and it was going to increase taxes by $1.64 billion. The Republican legislature countered with an $87.5 billion budget, a $3.7 billion reduction from Evers' plan. Tony Evers did sign off on the Republican plan. In that Republican plan, there was $2.4 billion in tax cuts. If you add that to the 1.6 that Evers was going to add, that's $4 billion. We have a lot of excess money, but where did it come from? You'd have to conclude both of these parties missed the budget, because we're going to approach a $5 billion surplus at the end of this cycle. It came from increased sales taxes because of inflated values of trades and services and retail costs. So the taxpayer is paying that 8.7 to 10% inflated money for the same products from a year ago, and on top of that, they have to pay increased sales tax. And that's where most of the $5 billion came from. We need to step back and say, that's insult to injury. That money should go back to the taxpayers in the best form possible, and that's what the next legislature needs to work on.
Thank you. Mr. Lavrenz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually it looks like a big chunk of that money is going to go back in the form of a credit, to the taxpayers, which is what should be happening, is that it should go back to the taxpayers. And then you can also use whatever's left over to work on things like infrastructure, helping out the schools, trying to protect the environment, just doing good infrastructure work in order to actually keep our, roads clear, keep people safe by, funding police. We can actually send a lot of that money back to the cities where it's been taken away from them by the state legislature. Like the one that I heard back last week was that the city of Milwaukee is getting less money now than it was 20 years ago from the state legislature. Like, how are they supposed to be able to fund everything if their budget has been cut that much?
All right, thank you. The next question, what is your opinion on the elimination of state income tax to make Wisconsin more economically competitive and attractive to new workforce? We'll start with you, Mr. Lavrenz.
I don't think that that's a good idea. The state income tax, it's part of what funds, what we have here in the state. We kind of need to actually be able to produce money through the tax revenue in order to fund the things I was talking about in the last question. Fund our schools, fund our police, fund the fire stations, fund, our roads, fund basically all of the public works. And if you cut that dramatically by cutting all of the state income tax, that just does not make a lot of sense to me.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Connor.
That discussion from Joe, if you replace the state income tax with a sales tax, it doesn't mean you end up with less money to do the things that you talked about. But if you get back to the issue of using a state sales tax to fund the majority of the operations of the state, it has worked very effectively in other states. However, I can look at some of those states that have a state sales tax, but when you add all of the other taxes that are still out there, they eliminate the income tax, but there are a number of other taxes that come in play. Sometimes it's not that big of an advantage. Gubernatorial candidate Tim Michaels is saying it's something we should look at. I've been on the record going back to March. I think we need to look at all packages of taxes. What's the total cost, and what provides the best benefit for Wisconsin that will make us competitive with the states that Wisconsinites are leaving to go to? If we do that, we can come up with a winning combination, and it could be any and all of the above.
All right, thank you. Envision Greater Fond du Lac works very closely with the 33 municipalities in Fond du Lac County. It is consistently reported that the shared revenue model is not sufficient for municipalities to maintain, much less improve or add, roads, culverts, etc. How do you propose to alleviate the infrastructure burden on municipalities? And we'll look to Mr. O'Connor for the first response.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to sit in on the board meetings of each of our townships, each of our villages, and here in Fond du Lac. This is the number one conversation in those meetings. It's exaggerated to a certain extent if you're sitting in a village of Oakfield and they're trying to figure out, how are we gonna replace our 70-year-old water and sewer infrastructure? We have to build some more roads. We don't know where the money's coming from. So there's fear for the smaller communities. You get to profit sharing in Milwaukee, and as Joe pointed out, in Milwaukee, the current formula means that Milwaukee's sending more money to Madison than they get back in profit sharing. Profit sharing was created in 1911, and it was a way of saying, how can we reduce real estate taxes and tax burden at the local level, pick it up through a sales tax at the state level, and then figure out a distribution model to alleviate some of the pain. It does not alleviate all of the pain, but I think what is needed, and I would take a program like this, it needs a 5-year review. You have changes in demographics, you have changes in needs. Take a 5-year review and you update that on a regular basis. Again, you take a county budget or a village budget or a township budget and you add 10% inflation to that, because a lot of theirs has to do with fuel. Again, oil's twice the price it was 18 months ago. So the costs for these organizations are going up. And
20 seconds.
we're not going to fix all their problems, but we can improve the profit-sharing formula.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lavrenz, your thoughts?
I mean, an audit of the sharing program makes a lot of sense because that's just part of my engineering background is you want to continuously audit. You want to always be looking for improvements on different things like that. But should be able to, split that money better so that way every municipality can actually fund the projects that they need to fund. Like there are plenty of them that are necessary upgrades, necessary ones to maintain. Those should be the ones that are given the first priority and be able to be sure to be funded. Make sure that you can get that money out of the shared profiting.
Thank you. Sticking with the topic of infrastructure, of the state's $2 billion transportation budget, more than 50% is accounted for through the gas tax. Projecting the rise of electric vehicle use, how would you supplement declining revenues from the gas tax? Mr. Lavrenz, we'll start with you.
Well, it seems like a big reason, one that we're already doing is by increasing registration tax on on hybrid cars and electric cars. So I would look to see if that's enough to do it. If that doesn't fill in the gap, then we can look at other avenues too. Potentially, I don't think you would really need to raise the gas tax itself, but you're already doing it with the registration side of it. I mean, I have a hybrid car. I know that mine was more expensive to re-register than my mom's regular car, regular old style car. So I already know that we're getting that. And if we're going to continue to have registration with electric cars, we should be getting more profit from that.
Thank you. And Mr. O'Connor, your thoughts?
This issue is front and center for any discussion I've had in Madison. How are we going to fund the transportation budget going forward? We do have, it's really generational and transformation taking place within the industry, whereby you have the electrical vehicle market coming into play, but separate of that, you have much better mileage per gallon cars on the market. With that, they're using less gas over time. If they use less gas, they're not going to have the same income coming in from that revenue base. Registrations can pick up part of it, but quite frankly, because of the significant increase in the cost of maintaining roads, highways, and bridges, we're going to need a more comprehensive review than that, and that could include the gas tax, but the gas drivers don't want to pay for everybody else. So you can't get it all done there. Registration picks up another piece of that, and I think we're going to have to use a bigger net to figure out how to capture the dollars to match the financial needs in our various municipalities and jurisdictions.
All right, thank you. Moving on to education. The role of the UW system as an economic engine in Wisconsin provides educated and skilled talent. While there have been bigger state investments in the UW system's capital budgets in recent years, there also has been a tuition freeze and modest increases in the operational budget. What's your position on the system's request for a bigger increase in general purpose revenue, or GPR, in this next state biennial budget? And Mr. O'Connor, we'll ask you to start, please.
This one's a real challenge, and I'm going to take it back just to a budget mindset. We have to help the public to stop believing that the government can fund every need or wish that's out here, and the public has to stop believing that some politician is going to move the books to make that happen. The UW system is a huge expense for everyone in this state. Tuition freezes, part of that took place because we had the UW system hiding hundreds of millions of dollars and not disclosing it to the legislature. There was a consequence for that. Going forward, I would challenge, whether it's in state government or if it's at the university system, we need to figure out how to bring costs under control and not continually look for more income from the tax-paying public to make it happen. I believe, I lived in Madison for a number of years. I can tell you there's a bloated budget down there somewhere between the state and the university system. I'd be spending my time working on that first.
Thank you. Mr. Lavrenz, your thoughts?
So our Wisconsin education system is one of the biggest things that we have. It's like one of the crown jewels of what we have as, as a state. We want to make sure that we're producing the best and the brightest through the system. And I think that we need to make sure that we can help maintain the costs to make it affordable for people to go to college, if they want to. But also we need to work on making the costs. Obviously they need to just be slightly lower. I know that they had unlocked that freeze, so they were able to raise the rates, it looks like, this time around. But it still is something that clearly, if there is an issue with the budget that's like bloated, there should be audits. And just like any other sort of government agency, I think that we should be doing continuous audits with it in order to find improvements, in order to find different pieces that we can either remove or improve upon, just because that's just how I feel like most things should happen, is we need to be able to continuously improve them.
All right, thank you. Sticking with education, Senator Dan Fine is currently vice chair on the 2022 Legislative Council Study Committee on Shared School District Services to review current barriers to shared administrative or other services between school districts, and explore statutory changes or creation of incentives to encourage efficiencies. What statutory changes or creation of incentives would you support or propose as it relates to school district services? And we'll start with Mr. Lavrenz.
So for services, I think that especially ones like mental health care and other ones that are pretty expensive for every school to have on site, they could share the people that are actually working for those and be able to transfer them between different schools and be able to get some help that way. I mean, I think that there shouldn't be any real restrictions on it. If you're close, like, each of the schools should have access to those same providers.
All right, thank you. And Mr. O'Connor, your thoughts?
Well, I can think back over the years, being in smaller communities where they talked about consolidating school systems. Boy, that's tough stuff. Your local community, they've got a banner out there. They're the Lions, or they're the Giants, or they're whatever they are. Making changes is hard. The economy of our society right here in Fond du Lac County and in our state is such that the cost of education is high. The cost of long-term legacy costs. We build some beautiful buildings and we put together some wonderful sports complexes, but the cost of maintaining those over time is not going to go away. So when you put these costs together, the expenses that are being faced in various communities, I think the focus would, number one, be the student. providing the student a good education. But then when you back away from that, then you could look at consolidating a variety of enterprise or administrative duties between school districts. I think over time, that will become evident. Because if not, then we have to raise your real estate taxes at a local level, and we're gonna go out and do a referendum and ask if you, as the public, want to help fund that. Typically, that doesn't happen very well. So I think we need to make a strong case of why consolidation is happening everywhere. I was part of the banking industry. 25 years ago, there were 750 banks in Wisconsin. Today, we're at 160. You could do the same thing with insurance agencies. How about medical clinics? How many local doctors and physicians' offices are there today? How about having a county economic development committee and having a city chamber? The best solution there was we merged those together to maximize the outcome and lower our costs. I believe we need to look at that in a wise way with our community schools.
Thank you. They've asked me then to now change gears, and before we wrap up, I want to give each candidate an opportunity to provide closing remarks. This too will be limited to the 2 minutes that we've been using. So for closing remarks, I turn first to Mr. O'Connor.
Thank you. And thank you once again, Judge Sharp, for serving as our moderator, and to Envision Greater Fond du Lac for hosting this event. The final question of the night really comes down for me, is to ask you the question, why should you vote for me? Let me begin by saying that you have my promise that I will do everything within my power to represent the 52nd District and keep the American dream alive for the next generations that will follow us. There are many issues I wasn't able to get to tonight. The half hour is short. Please go to my website, www.jerryo'connor.com. You'll learn more about myself, about the issues I support, and you'll see why I have nearly 200 endorsements from elected officials, the law enforcement community, school teachers, people just like you folks. I bring a lifetime of everyday practical and executive experience to use on your behalf. I'm not going to Madison looking for somewhere where I can learn how to help somebody. I've been doing that my entire life in the critical areas of life where people are making family decisions, education decisions, housing decisions, business decisions, etc. I found myself living in a world where I got to help people every day. Not everyone has that opportunity. Worked with service clubs and schools and with charitable organizations, making a difference in the communities. Sunday, there was an NBC poll that came out that said 71% of Americans believe we're headed in the wrong direction. We need to reverse that course, and we need to do it quickly. Well, we have the time to do it. I would serve as a citizen legislature, and I'm not looking for a way to get on the public payroll for the rest of my life.
20 seconds.
Our future's too important for that. My approach to the issues we face will come from a Christian conservative perspective that served us well in creating this country, and it will serve us well in turning this country around. I will fight for long-term economically sustainable policies. I know we can do more, and we can do better at providing government services and protection for Wisconsinites. In closing, I'm Jerry O'Connor, and I humbly ask for your vote leading up to and on November 8th. God bless Wisconsin, God bless America, and God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Lavrenz.
So I may not have as much experience in dealing with some of the things that my opponent has, but I still think I can bring a good vision for what we want to do here in Fond du Lac and in Wisconsin. I think that a fresh set of eyes on there can help out a lot, because what I've been seeing right now, you know, it's like he stated, from 71% that it's looking like it's in the wrong direction. The problem is that the state legislature has far too much power over that, and they've really been pushing it in the wrong direction. And I mean, a lot of the stuff is a lot of holdover from the Walker administration too. But I think that as long as we can keep and actually make some sort of change, we can actually see some of the things that we actually want to try and improve the lives for people here in the state, in the city of Fond du Lac and in the state of Wisconsin. I'm Joe Lavrenz, and, I'm asking for your vote on November 8th. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Well, Mr. Lavrenz, Mr. O'Connor, thank you both for your time, your remarks in response to the questions that were proposed by Envision Greater Fond du Lac. Before we conclude, I'd like to call upon Joe Van Heusen, who is the Senior Director of Membership and Program with Envision Greater Fond du Lac, for a couple of quick closing remarks. Joe?
Thank you. I'm going to sit back here because this is where there's a microphone, so I was told the camera still focuses on me. But thank you guys very much on behalf of Envision Greater Fond du Lac. Thank you to the candidates for a good and respectful course of discussion. Thank you to our moderator, Mr. Sharp, again, for serving in this capacity. And I also want to thank all of you who joined us, either in person or online. Thank you for your attention and your participation. For those of you who don't know, Envision Greater Fond du Lac is, as Jerry had stated, the combined Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development Corporation representing Fond du Lac County and the surrounding area. As the voice of the business community, Envision facilitates strategic initiatives between the private and public sectors to cultivate a vibrant local economy. We inform our stakeholders about issues affecting their business, and we support public decisions that move our economy and communities forward. Whether it's attracting new business to our industrial parks, offering technical assistance to entrepreneurs, or data research, we're involved behind the scenes to grow our economic local ecosystem. We develop the future workforce by partnering businesses with students through a variety of programs. And through programs like our Agribusiness Council, our Young Professionals of Fond du Lac, Human Resource Association, Safety Council, and other networking events, Envision facilitates connections and shares best practices. We spotlight the good in our communities, and we strive to make them a better place to live, work, and play. County residents like yourselves make up part of our stakeholder base, and offering events like this forum help to provide insight into issues that impact our area now and in the future. So you all have the ability to impact our communities by voting. We encourage you to exercise your right to vote on November 8th, and if you have any questions regarding the voting process, where your polling location is, how to vote, how to get registered, please visit the City of Fond du Lac's website. They have a nice resource with all that information. So thank you guys again. Everyone have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.